this episode, we're looking at various types of motorhomes, from small campervans right up to converted buses and trucks. There are all sorts of motorhomes available today, and we have a few examples below to give you an idea of what you can get. Purchase price variation is pretty huge, down to around $7,000 for a really old one, all the way up to $700,000 and well over that. At the bottom end of the scale are the campervans, known by those who camp near them as whiz-bangs. The sliding door on the side of these vehicles should give you some clue as to how they got that name. They're basically a standard long wheelbase van that's been turned into a motorhome. Because they're small, they have quite a lot of limitations. Purchase price varies from around about $6,000 for the pretty old ones to well over $130,000 for the latest new models. Getting a new model these days is a little bit more difficult than it used to be because of the introduction of other types of smaller motorhomes like the Mercedes Sprinter. With campervans, you can get either solid roof or pop-up roof versions. The negative aspects of these are similar to pop-up roof caravans. You can check the previous episode for a discussion on pop-ups. Four-wheel drive versions of campervans are available, but purchasers need to be aware that they're not really serious off-road vehicles. If you want a serious off-road camper, you might want to think about a troop carrier conversion. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of campervans? Well, on the positive side, they don't require a special driving licence. You can drive them on an ordinary car licence. They can easily be used as a daily vehicle, and they can park just about anywhere. They're probably the cheapest type of motorhome to run, and parts are readily available for most models. There's no problems getting towed if you happen to break down, and they can fit into pretty well every kind of campsite. They're easy to turn around if you take the wrong road, and they have 4 tyres to replace instead of 6 or 8. The licence fees for these are generally about the same as an ordinary car. They do have quite a few disadvantages, however. Because they're small, they have very limited storage and living space. There's not really enough headroom for taller people in the solid roof models. If the side annex is up, you can't move, and that can become a real pain. When you leave your site for a short time to drive somewhere, you do need to leave something there, because chances are, in a free campsite, somebody will just come along and pinch your spot. Campervans aren't great at towing other vehicles. The engines generally are not strong enough, and the clutches definitely are not strong enough. There's not a lot of space for extra water tanks, with the standard tank coming in at around 20 litres. That really isn't very much at all. They can be positively claustrophobic in wet weather. Cooking facilities tend to be cramped and quite limited. It's difficult, if not impossible, to fit an ordinary room air conditioner. They're often limited to something like a porta potty for your toilet, and it's pretty well impossible to fit an internal shower. They may or may not be able to fit a hot water system, and gas bottle storage is usually around about the 4 kilo mark. There's limited space for house batteries, and limited capacity for modifications. Moving on from campervans, we get to small motorhomes. There's a huge variety of these, and they range from slide-on designs to the cab-over Winnebago style and to top-end Mercedes Sprinters. Older models in this category, like the really old Bedford CFs, can be picked up very cheaply. But with those, you've got to be prepared to do some mechanical work and a lot of tidying up. Most motorhomes in this category compare reasonably well with the facilities offered by small caravans. The main problem is the amount of food and water storage available. Not many motorhomes in this category tow a second vehicle. This means leaving your campsite vacant every time you go into town. Like campervans, you have to leave something there if you want your campsite to be available when you come back. The amount of water these carry is also limited, but certainly more than a camper van. The smaller motorhomes are popular simply because it's easy to find somewhere to park and they're easy to drive. Unlike camper vans, you don't need a special driving licence. Medium-sized motorhomes offer a compromise between the smaller coaster bus style and the huge Winnebagos and Swagman models. Most are based on light or medium truck chassis, and they have a cab over bed. They're generally quite expensive, with even older second-hand models commanding prices of $45,000 and up. The major advantage we see in this style of motorhome is the option to tow a small second vehicle and having a reasonable amount of space for living and storage. And then we get to the large motorhomes. Pretty well everything we say shortly about buses also applies to large motorhomes. The main exception being that most buses are heavier and far stronger than any large motorhome. In general, a bus has a much higher carrying capacity as they were originally designed to carry large numbers of people and lots of luggage. Large purpose-built motorhomes, like the Swagman, are horrendously expensive. $500,000 these days won't even get you a top-of-the-line model. These prices are pretty crazy, as you can buy a house and land for far less than that in many places. Speaking of buses, we need to also look at the smaller buses before we get on to the big ones. By far the most popular of these are the Toyota Coasters and Mazdas. The purchase price can vary from $7,000 for really old second-hand models to $150,000 or more for top-of-the-range conversions. Now let's have a look at some of the advantages of small buses. The short wheelbase models can park almost anywhere. You can just about fit them into most parking spots, but they can be difficult to get out again if you've got people parking both sides of you. They're definitely cheaper to run than the bigger buses, and they're generally cheaper to repair. They're easier to tow if broken down, and they've generally got the engine power to tow a second vehicle. They are very stable on the road, and spare parts are readily available for all but the oldest models. They will generally fit into most campsites, and insurance and registration can be relatively light. You can usually fit a room air conditioner in these as well. It's possible to have an internal shower and a hot water system, and they have reasonable gas bottle storage, with usually around about 9 kilos. They also have a reasonable amount of space for house batteries. Among the disadvantages of smaller buses can be the necessity of having an MR-class licence, depending on the weight of the vehicle. If you've got one with a sideways bed, they can be pretty narrow, especially for taller people, and the roofs are generally not high enough for anybody 6 feet and over. They do have limited living and storage space, but with the addition of a trailer, you can definitely improve on that. And if you're not towing a second vehicle, and the annex is set up, you can't move anywhere. There tends to be a lack of space for big water tanks in these sorts of vehicles, but you can still carry a reasonable amount of water. Replacing the tyres can be expensive, and with small buses that generally requires replacing 6 tyres. They're not great when the weather turns nasty because there's not that much living space in them, but they can still be quite comfortable. It's possible with this style that you're limited to a porta-potty sized toilet. Next we get on to converted large buses. A converted bus or coach will carry more than just about any other type of motorhome. Some can be fitted with large roof racks and underfloor storage. Most are quite capable of towing a large trailer. In general terms, buses are stronger and heavier than large custom-made motorhomes. The purchase price can vary from as little as $8,000 all the way over $500,000, and you just keep going from there, depending on the age of the bus and the options it has available. If you want a brand new one, good luck with that. You're going to need really deep pockets. Be very wary of buying older buses, or like us, you can find it can be very difficult to find spare parts. So, the advantages of large converted buses would be things like huge amount of space for living and storage, very stable on the road, the ability to tow a large second vehicle, high capacity for modifications, easy to live in when the weather isn't good. In fact, they're probably the easiest vehicle to live in. The ability to fit a good-sized water tanks, enough room for a decent-sized fridge, even two-door models. They tend to be more secure than the smaller vehicles too, because windows are up high. There's also space to install things like showers, toilets and a laundry. You can fit quite a number of solar panels on top of buses. You can fit a room air conditioner or two. There's room for a full kitchen. You have a choice of cassette toilets or black water tanks, and you can have extra gas bottle storage, up to about 3 by 9 kilo bottles. There's also plenty of space for house batteries. Now on to the negative aspects of owning a big converted bus. Very large vehicles like this can be hard to park. Not a lot of places provide parking for large vehicles, and that can in some cases include caravan parks. You'll generally require an HR class driving licence. If you break down, buses can be pretty difficult to move, and you generally need specialised towing vehicles. They are expensive to repair, far more so than smaller vehicles, and they're pretty expensive to run. You're not always going to be able to get into caravan parks and campsites because of the size of your vehicle. Buses definitely require you to have a second vehicle to get around in, because once you're parked up and everything is set up, you're not going to want to move at all. Parts for older buses can definitely be difficult to get. You can't hide from the local council ranger in a large bus either. Size and weight restrictions can prevent you going to some locations, and if you happen to take the wrong road, you can have quite a bit of difficulty turning around. Replacing a full set of tyres on a big bus is expensive. It's also more expensive to license and generally more expensive to insure. Older models tend to be quite slow on the road. Special regulations governing axle weight, length, height and overhangs need to be looked into before you buy one.